shining a light on the women creating an impact, leading organizations, and mission-focused strategic programs across the federal technology and consulting community. This is Impact. I am being joined today by Maria Durham, the Director, Division of Data Analysis and Market-Based Pricing at CMS. Maria, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Well, thank you.
First of all, tell me a little bit about what it is you do over there at CMS.
So my division does market-based pricing. So we collect a lot of data, market-based data, and we price certain services, Part B drugs, clinical lab, ground to ambulance. And we also do the data analysis for 8 other federal agencies to help with their missions as well.
To start with, is there an experience or an event that you believe helped steer you down your current path?
You know, that's an interesting question. The first thing that comes to mind is that my first job at CMS was working in claims processing. And you really have to understand what the early to mid 1990s was really like. You know, we all had phones with actual cords, and although everyone had computers, they didn't all use their computers. Many of them still use their typewriters, and we still had to type DOS commands in order to print something. And I had the email address for the entire division, so maybe I'd get 2 emails a month, and I would print them out on my dot matrix printer, and I'd hand them to the person they were probably for, and they'd handwrite an answer, and I would type it back in. And the person on the other end also had to have IBM profs, so they would receive the answer. So when an edict came down from above, as they usually do, that we're going to be 95% electronic within 2 years in claims processing, that seemed just crazy. Now that's laughable, but at the time we were just starting to explore electronic data interchange on the institutional side of claims processing, and I think we were pretty close to 0% electronic on the professional side. So it wasn't like a hill to climb, it was like an entire mountain range. And we did it. On the institutional side, I worked on the conversion of the UB82 claim form to the jazzier UB92 form with its corresponding 192 byte flat file record, and created direct data entry software for everyone. And we went on the road to teach people even how to use it. And we just gave it away. We didn't even charge for it. We gave it away, and we did it, and we met our goals. So when I see fire standards now, and I see really sophisticated electronic health records, I know how far we've come, and I know there's always going to be room to grow and always room to interoperate. But for me, it all started with that first routine cross-country interaction that we had between providers and payers.
I remember when I first started out, because I started out in news radio, we used bag phones to get a hold of each other. Oh my gosh, when I show my 15-year-old son what it looks like, it's funny.
We're starting with, yes.
So do you have a leader or a mentor that helped guide you along the way?
My great-grandmother and my grandmother were really both my leaders and mentors. First, my great-grandmother, just because she was so incredibly brave. She lived in a country that persecuted people for their religion. She was ethnically Greek, and the people around her were starving or dying. They weren't allowed to buy from Christian stores, and she had this horrific choice to make. And she could stay with what was familiar and probably risk a not very good fate, or she could flee with her 2 daughters and come to the United States. And so this little lady with an elementary school education and 0 English skills chose to get on a boat and flee. And from there on, she kind of lived the American dream. She had a little business. Her older daughter, who was my great aunt, was one of the first women to graduate from Johns Hopkins as a math major. And Johns Hopkins was so worried at the time that having female students would distract their real students, that she even had to go at night to be able to finish. And she finished. And my great-grandmother really valued education for her girls at a time when most women weren't educated at all. And she always saw that as a way to get ahead, and wanted to push her girls to achieve what she couldn't. And my grandmother also had those same values. So fast forward lots and lots and lots of decades, when I was in grad school, also at Johns Hopkins, I was about to drop out. I had a very crazy busy full-time job. I had a house. I had family responsibilities. My mother was very sick, and I was frankly struggling with 3 classes, and they were kind of hard subjects. Calculus-based statistics is not for the weak at heart.
Right.
And when she heard that I was thinking of dropping out she absolutely about died and said, okay, what can I do? And what she did was come over to my house every day and took care of literally everything but work and school so I could just focus. And she always believed that education was needed to progress and wanted to be part of the solution. So I guess, mentors can be kind of a funny thing. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's about helping people deliver career goals and new paths and develop professionally and make the right relationships. But sometimes it's just about supporting someone in a very practical way for goals that at the moment seemed impossible. I would have regretted not finishing, but at that moment, it just seemed impossible.
Even though it's been years and years, it's
Oh,
really crazy to realize how far we've come in that span of time.
it's mind-boggling.
Yeah. So, do you have a pivotal moment or experience that helped shape your leadership style and approach?
In my experience, people don't really care as much about how much you know, but they want to know how much you care. And I'm not sure there's a single pivotal moment that shaped my leadership style, but I think it's important to me to be true to myself and true to my values, to be empathetic and value my staff, to have a vision and be able to communicate that vision, to be adaptable. I mean, I work in government, so we have changes every 3 to 4
Oh,
years.
yeah.
So embracing that change and staying agile and being open to new things is a reality of life. So in that vein, I think leadership styles are an evolution as well. And I try to be an adaptive leader. I've led teams that require very hands-on monitoring because there are cases in queue and targets that need to be met every day. And I've led teams like the teams I have now where they're experts and I'm there to set the vision and I'm there to create a supportive environment, but I can let them fly and I trust them to do their work and know their craft. So I think like most people, I've had great bosses and I've had some not so great bosses, and I can
Mm-hmm.
confidently say I've learned from all of them. I translate that experience to what I can do today to inspire my team. I try to lead in a very respectful way to support my team. I want to see them achieve their goals. And I've mentored a few young women who started out as interns with me, and now they're in like the front offices of agencies or they're technical leads on really big projects. And I'm so proud of them as leaders. And I hope that they continue to pay it forward so that others can reach new heights too.
How can we encourage more young women to aspire to leadership roles and pursue careers that are typically male dominated?
Okay, so this sounds very nerdy, but I swear this is true. I read an article the other day about neuroplasticity, and it was about the brain's ability to reorganize itself by
Mhm.
forming new neural pathways. And what they were saying is that humans focus their attention on new things and different things, and that actually helps them to rewire themselves and rewire those pathways. And similarly, I've worked for some hierarchical top-down organizations, and there are certain established pathways that vault you to the top. Most frequently it's very long hours and putting in a lot of face time in the office, maybe a lot of travel. And I think that's exactly what needs to change. That traditional pathway, is actually dysfunctional, I think, for everyone, men and women. And I think to encourage young women to aspire to leadership, we need to do something different and create new pathways. To be creative and effective, you've got to break out, and maybe it's working at home or having flexible hours or actual daycare or even allowing time for hobbies or recreation. I think I'm a big fan of doing something else that creates and uses those other pathways so that you can return to your work challenges with fresh approaches and fresh views. I just got to experience this just last week. When in the history of ever is your 15th hour at work your smartest and your best? We were working on a regulation, and I have to say it probably wasn't. So, how do you promote more women? I think it's that you create those new paths, and it's not simply just accommodating people, so that they have all the responsibilities of everyone and everything. I think it's changing the industry and recognizing, what people have been traditionally programmed to do, doesn't work anymore. And leaders need to model that change. Companies need to allow for that change. And I've always thought, we should encourage women to be those ladder builders of those new pathways, and instead of ladder climbers of existing ones that aren't working. And those ladder builders can change the paradigm for everyone and take us into that new world.
And this seems like it's a great time in our life right now where we're building all of these paths where you can say, I want to be here and make it happen.
Exactly. We have the technology to do that.
So now looking ahead, what do you envision for the future of women in leadership, and what steps do you think we can take to accelerate that process?
Oh gosh, I think my first answer would be to never limit your kids' dreams. And I would say that for men and women. I think there are opportunities out there to make your mark in a variety of fields. And I would encourage anyone to find that area where they can thrive. And once that happens, first, know what your interests are and what you're good at. And if you, for example, like STEM, stay with that. But at the same time, I would encourage women who prefer other areas to stick with those too, regardless of whether they're male dominated or not. You know, I know in my life, I went to grad school and got a master's of science and then later an MBA. But undergrad, I went to college on a 4-year art scholarship in sculpture. You know, most paths are not necessarily a straight line. And when you begin and where you begin, you know, is not necessarily where you end. You know, I also suggest related to that, just constantly learning, constantly developing your abilities and exuding confidence and persevering and not giving up and adding value and delivering. And adding value and delivering, you know, could be a journey in of itself. But I feel when I've done that again and again, particularly in multiple large IT efforts, that's really kept the doors open to me throughout my career.
Keeping your options, never saying no to a potential option. Like a lot of people, I feel like, especially talking to different people as I do this podcast, their career that they're in now wasn't even something they even considered back when they first started out. So keeping your options sort of open too.
Oh gosh, exactly. Exactly. I kind of fell into my career in in a very odd way, but in a good way. And you know, I'm excited to see more women take on leadership roles and inspire others and bring that new worldview in. And to me, it doesn't really matter if they're a CEO of a Fortune 500 company or leaders in public service or even leaders in your local community, or they could even be a point guard in the WNBA. But I think, you know, you have to strive to recognize the work that's been done by trailblazers and inspire others to push ahead. I mean, it's hard to imagine 50 years ago, you know, there were no professional sports for women. There wasn't a woman running for president. And 50 years ago, there were significantly fewer women in college. And I was reading the other day that they outnumber men. So the talent is really there. That's and good. Simply a matter of finding those people and translating that work into industry success.
And even looking ahead, the careers options are going to be totally different. Like when we first started out, our careers weren't even a thing. Like their podcaster was not a thing when I was in college whatsoever. So
exactly. And it's such an easy way to learn and hear new ideas and fresh ideas.
So Maria, is there anything else you would like to add?
I don't think so. This has been really great. And I really appreciated talking to you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you're keeping up to date on the latest episodes and learn more at govforum.io.